really think hard about your positioning. Without it, you've got a blunt knife trying to cut through a tough steak, and it's going to show up in not so great ROI metrics when it comes to digital advertising and demand creation and capture. And I think it's an area that, just go look on the internet, you can see that it's an area that's neglected. And AI's made it worse.
Welcome to the MBD podcast, the show where we dig into what's actually working or not when it comes to scaling businesses with the people who've been there. Today's guest has definitely been there. So why don't you go ahead, introduce yourself, tell them about what you've done and where you're going.
Thanks, Jason. Great to be here. I've spent the last couple of decades now in B2B, B2C, marketing, sales, even a little bit of product and engineering along the way. And today I'm focused on helping companies grow and reach their true potential. I think it's an absolutely great time to be in this space. AI is hugely disruptive, and there's a question on everybody's lips: how can I get better with it? So excited to spend a little bit of time talking about that and how companies can do better.
It's funny you say disruptive because that was like the catchphrase like 5 years ago. To be disruptive, how are we going to be disruptive? And nothing really was disruptive until AI popped out. You're like, that's what disruptive is.
But we said everything was disruptive, didn't we?
Right, I know. My email campaign, my email tool is disruptive. It's creating waves in the marketplace. So when you start working with a business, what are some of the areas that you focus on first to help them start getting through areas that they're failing in and helping them scale?
I think where you can immediately dig in, even before you've really started working with them, is looking at their messaging and their positioning. And I think AI has made the problem worse. It's made us forget, if we even knew, how to do good positioning in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And so you look at, I think cybersecurity is probably a great example of
Oh yeah.
this. AI washing, we've heard of sports washing, but this is AI washing. Everybody's just slapped AI on everything. So there's somebody was telling me there's like 4,500 cybersecurity companies, which is sort of more than one per head of information security on the planet or something like that. It's crazy. So it's a crowded space, and these tools are amazing, but they're very hard to figure out exactly what it is that they do. And you see so many companies now with the tagline, cybersecurity built with AI, the number one cybersecurity platform powered by AI.
Now, what does that mean?
What does it mean? What are you going to do for me?
Mm-hmm.
I've got a problem that I need to
Yep.
solve. Do you help me with that problem? I understand you do cybersecurity, but that's a big area, and I've got some platforms already. So, why am I investing time and thought into you?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you can't answer that question, which, by the way, most people will struggle that question, they'll struggle with it, right? They can tell you what they do, but they can't tell you how or why they can necessarily help you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a subtle difference, but it's an important difference. So when you jump on people's websites and they talk about, we're the number one, this
Yep.
platform, it's all me, me, me. And imagine going on a date with somebody that just talks about themselves all the time.
I think we've been on those dates.
Yeah, well, it's
Like,
not, doesn't go very well, does it?
no.
Doesn't go
um,
very well. So
But
I
it's
think
interesting
that's
because when
kind
you
of,
talk to engineers who are the head of these cybersecurity, they don't understand how, one, they don't know how to talk in how a regular person does. They speak engineer. But two, yeah, it's like it's all about what they've done, right? And that's something I see across or especially in professional services. They all want to talk about how great they are. I've got this award. I've done this. I've done that. We did this. But they never talk about, I call it I or me or I versus you marketing. We're going to help you do this. We're going to help you achieve that. And then you go into kind of your accolades. So it's interesting, getting the right positioning, the messaging, and the questions that you're asked. Like what are some of the base questions you ask to help companies understand what they provide to a user?
well, just before that, like, to piggyback on something you said, the reason why we're very keen to tell everybody that we've won awards and stuff, it's that social proof and
Mm,
need for credibility, which is important. Right? That is important, but it comes at the right time. Otherwise, you're just, going back to that dating analogy. Hey, I've got a big house, I've got a big car. great. But I'm not dating a big house and a car. I'm trying to
Right.
meet a life partner, right?
Yeah.
Um, so you've got to start with explaining the problem that you solve and doing it in a way that explains why you're the only people that can solve that problem. Otherwise, it's like a blunt knife or an engine without oil. It just doesn't work without that. And so everyone wants to go spending money on digital ads and do performance marketing or growth marketing or whatever you want to call it, which is good, but it's massively ineffective because you haven't dialed into what is your unique and powerful differentiating proposition and how are you going to say it in a way that's memorable.
Hmm.
And without that, you're just wasting money.
Do you
And
have an example of a way to make it memorable?
yeah, I mean, there are so many brands that do things well, and it's this lost art of creativity. And I think coming from predominantly B2B, done a bit of B2C along the way, um, it's almost like we think the B in B2B means we've got to be boring.
Mm.
And we don't. I mean, if you look at ServiceNow, they do a fantastic job of making what used to be, some might say it still is, um, it's an IT service management platform at its core, right? Ticketing, IT ticketing. It's not something that a lot of people get out of bed with a spring in their step for. But what they've done, they've really leaned into AI and that story, and they've brought it to life. And they've brought it to life in such a clever way because they're tapping into a very powerful human emotion. They're tapping into the emotion of fear, and they're trying to do away with that.
Hmm.
And the fear is people are fearing these AI platforms that are going to come and take away their jobs. And I think it's a big question mark, and there's a lot to be said on that topic. But they're leaning straight into that. They're humanizing the situation. They're humanizing the people, the personas
Hmm.
that they sell to in their ads. They've got these great ads with Idris Elba, and they're walking through sort of day in the life scenarios and explaining what these agents can do, but they're doing it in a very human, down to earth way, not a technical way, not a speeds and feeds way, but a very sort of human business way. And I think they're doing it in a really, really strong fashion. And it shows up. I mean, their market cap is phenomenal, revenue growth off the charts, retention off the charts. Um, it's just, I think that's a great example of something that's probably in a really, you know, niche category to start with in terms of interestingness, and they've
Hmm.
just made it sort of mass market interesting. Like I want to watch the next Idris Elba ad to see what happens, because
Yeah.
it's a fun story. I think they've done a great job, and I think it's a very different and unique approach. Salesforce, for example, they were probably one of the first B2B brands that really lent into mascots. And you remember when they sort of turned everything into cartoon characters and the zoo animals, and they really lent into the national parks. I think it was maybe 10 years ago now. They were probably one of the first to lean in heavily to that. And at the time, I remember thinking, what on earth are they doing? These are like sort of kids' cartoon characters. This is B2B software.
Yeah.
But it's super memorable, and hard to say that it hasn't worked for them. Again, it's
Yeah.
kind of humanizing what they do, and I think that's an extremely important thing to do right now with the fear and uncertainty around AI.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So you built into their messaging, you got the site up, you're created a memorable story. Now, what are kind of the next steps that you take from that point to help them?
Well, you got to make sure it's working, um, and it could be the message, and you got to test that.
Hmm.
And you can do that with your customers. You can do that, getting them in a room. You can do that with surveys. You can do that even with synthetic data now. AI can generate you customers and see how it's resonating. AI, in fact, can tell you, you can see if you're showing up in the chats. And here's the thing, I think a lot of people try to be super broad and they say, tell me the best IT service management platform. And they're like, okay, well, here are the ones. But actually, what people are asking for is, what's the best IT service management for a professional services firm of 10 people?
Mm-hmm.
Right? People are getting very specific now because they're using Gen AI tools instead of search tools. So they're asking super specific questions and looking for very specific answers. And so you can spend, an hour going through these tools, playing around with various different prompts and figuring out if you're showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's extremely important. As we know, search traffic is going down. It was only 4 or 5% year on year, but that's millions of clicks and impressions that are now not hitting your websites. And they're being replaced by AI. So making sure that you show up in that is critical, but it also tells you, you know, are people understanding your messaging?
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're not, then they're not showing up. They're not asking the right questions. They're not seeing your brand. Then that shows up. So that's a really important way of figuring out if your message is resonating.
Mm-hmm.
And then, are the channels working? And another overused word, which I think is a horrible word, but attribution. And I think it's a horrible word because most people do it wrong. And they're looking at different models and should we be W shaped? Should we be first touch, last touch? The reality is, most of what's happening is happening in a place that you can't measure it
Mm-hmm.
as far as where people are hearing about you and finding you. And these attribution tools, spend $1 on Facebook advertising and I convert and I get $10 back. That's great. That's right in the sweet spot. But the Google ad platform is probably telling me the same thing, that you spent $2 there and you got that same conversion. And so these platforms are all double counting the same user, the same conversion, and they're not looking at it holistically across the whole customer journey. And so you're getting this very rosy picture of how well these platforms are working because they're all taking credit for the same conversion.
Yeah,
And
Yelp.
it's
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen Yelp, but they'll tell you that you made $1 million off 20 calls that they sent you in the prior week. Like they hung up.
best
Data
ROI ever.
attribution's a big thing. Yeah. GA4 helps with that because a lot of the people that we work with, we use GA4 to help, bring that in so that way we at least have an area that we can watch where that customer journey goes. Because I view it more as like it's an omnipresent marketing campaign verse. And we'll see this. Like, Clown will be like, well, Facebook's not doing as well as Google. Let's cut off Facebook. No, don't do that because your audience pools are built across platform. Then they cut it off. And then they go, oh, that didn't work. What were we thinking? Let's turn it back on. Okay. Well, it's not working as well as it did. Well, yeah, because you
Yeah.
ruined all the machine learning and history that you and it's just like
Yeah,
it's what
I
it
mean
is, right?
you have to be super careful, but you've also got to
Mm-hmm.
be able to as you've got to stitch it together across, certainly in B2B terms, you've got to look at it from an account-based perspective, not
Yeah.
just one single user that's converting or not. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's conversations with CFOs about this. You get some ones that are very, very smart, and then some others that don't fully understand it because it's a complex topic. And they'll be like, look, we're spending, 200K on LinkedIn advertising, and I'm getting no conversions from that. Let's just go spend more money on Google because that's where they're converting. It's like, well, yeah, but why are they converting there?
Yeah. How are
You
they
know,
getting into the Google audience? Why is it that Google's having
exactly.
success? Right?
Well, and
Because
then that's a good point because you can. That's another way of testing out. Right? Is the work I'm doing on my brand, is the messaging, is the positioning to help cement myself in people's minds? Is that paying off? Are they searching for me, or are they just doing a generic category search and then,
yeah.
I'm in an SEO PPC war for the keywords?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Or direct or branded search is really where you get the highest conversion rate. So leveraging LinkedIn and potentially this case to say, hey, we're the experts. And then they go into another browser and then they type it in because I get so much garbage on LinkedIn now. It's like, I want to make sure I go vet the company a little bit. And then, of course, that's where Google in search comes up, or the GEO stuff going on in AI, and then it comes up, and then I go. But that doesn't necessarily tie, because you can't marry that data. You can't follow that journey necessarily. That, hey, initial contact, unless you look at impressions, but that doesn't marry it to the actual user
No.
to be able to take that one person's whole journey seamlessly across the platforms and came up. So yeah, it's real, and it's funny because you say smart CFOs get it. I found smart CFOs that don't get it because they don't understand the context of how things work together, like you're kind of saying, where it's all these variables have influence, and if you remove one of those influential variables, you could eliminate your or destroy your
Hmm.
conversion rate.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's a complex topic, and it takes a lot to explain it to CFOs, and I think it's hard to do so in a way that makes business sense.
Hmm.
I think LinkedIn, for example, not to keep picking on that, but like the thought leadership ads, I think they're fantastic.
Hmm.
Great way of getting your point of view across to people, but you've got to have a point of view, and it's got to be memorable. And I think the other thing that kind of gets lost in the soup of ROI and attribution is that so much of this is happening before they're seeing your LinkedIn ads,
Hmm.
right? And I think we're getting better now at using the tools out there and the data out there to try and figure out who really is in the market for what you're doing right now. But the research says that anything between 90 and 95% of your market is not in buy mode.
Right. Yeah.
And yet we spend most of our money trying to capture the 5-10% that is in market. And if you dare mention the word brand in a boardroom or in budget conversations, people just think, right, that's the art department. We don't need any more crayons, you know? And it couldn't be further from the truth. You've got to
Yeah.
build the brand, and a brand is associated to a product and a problem.
Hmm.
You've got to build that, and you've got to spend money nurturing that and creating that. Now, as I said, there are tools, and we're getting better at using those tools that can help you be very targeted with how you build that brand and where you build that brand. But you've got to get on people's day one list. And if you don't, if you're not one of the one or two vendors that are on that list, you're not going to win. Because when that person does come into market, the research says they're going to pick, most of the time, they're going to pick from the first vendor that they remember.
Hmm.
But it's certainly going to be one of the top three on their day one list.
Yeah. Yeah. So gone through identified messaging, positioning, ad platforms generate. So now where you're currently at, how are you guys doing with all this in building your pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, it's tricky. Like a company that I was working with recently, coming in there, they were spending a good amount on brand, a healthy ratio. And in this case, which is unusual, they were not spending enough on capturing that demand.
Mm.
So we kind of shifted things around a bit and ended up shifting a lot of money away from the brand temporarily, partly because a lot of the assets that they were using were out of date and repetitive, but partly because there was no follow up, right? There was no offer, there was no ad behind that sort of high level branded ad that shows up on YouTube TV while you're watching CNBC, for example.
Hmm.
There was no follow up on digital properties where these people were hanging out. And so it was just a sort of one time hit, maybe a few times a week if they're tuning in at the same time. But it was effectively kind of that one time hit on that channel, and there was nothing behind it to keep driving that recognition and no real good offers to try and get them to at least come to our website.
So if you were mapping that out, essentially you had an awareness ad that didn't drive a call to action.
Yeah, which is fine. I don't mind that. That's not the
Yeah.
issue. A good awareness ad cannot, in my opinion, um, drive and be measured on a demand scale.
So
They just
right, yeah,
can't.
I'm
Otherwise,
saying
otherwise,
you.
it compromises
Yeah.
the brandness of it.
Yeah. So you
So it
have the
compromises the
awareness.
integrity.
And it
So
wasn't the
it's got to
follow.
be.
So it wasn't the retargeting that was in place.
It just wasn't. There wasn't any retargeting in place.
Okay.
The assets were old,
Hmm.
so they were worn out, and there was no, excitement. There was nothing that stood out amongst them, and there were no offers behind that as follow-ups to try and get them to at least come to the website. We weren't trying to get them to download a white paper or anything like that, but we wanted them to try and come and read a report on our website. We
Okay.
wanted them to take other actions on our website or other properties where we could start to track and build a picture of, right, where are you in your journey? One, because then we can follow up at the right time, not just have a BDR guide spam you to death. But two, also because we can also send more relevant content, right? You've looked at this, you've looked at that. That tells us that you're sort of past the initial education phase of the problem, starting to think about possible solutions and approaches to solving the problem. Let us give you this guide.
So
So
how do you? So I have an idea of or the way that we do this. How would you how would you take people who come and create their audience pools to retarget them with the content that you want them to see with where they're at in the journey?
I think it's based on their actions that they're taking. It's based on the interactions with the brand. And you can supplement that with third-party data, some great intent tool providers out there. The ABM world, for example, is where most of that data lives. But I think it's about getting a good handle on your first-party data. I think there's been some good news from G2 about opening up some of their data and AI, etc. A second-party feed in there as well, which is good, so you can see what's going on across your competitors' sites. So it's about pulling the data signals together to figure out who really is showing the behavior of somebody that's in market looking to buy your solution. And you've got to then map that against the positioning work that you've done and ultimately the ICP work, the ideal customer profile work that you've done. Am I really marketing to the right people? Another company I was talking with recently, their ICP was the Global 2000. I said, right, well, that's 2,000 companies across multiple different industries. Which ones are really the ones that are exhibiting buying behaviors? Which ones have lookalike customers that we've successfully closed and won and got live? So it's kind of marrying all of that back up with what really are our segments, who really are our ideal customers, and have we got the right message that aligns to all of those segments? Because in many cases, how they think about the problem and the nuances of the problem are different by that segment group.
Got it. Yeah. So identifying that actual user, their customer journey, then getting them what they want, so that way you can convert them into a customer. That good process. So if someone's listening and trying to scale right now, what's one piece of advice you wish you had earlier on?
Really think hard about your positioning.
Mm-hmm.
Without it, you've got a blunt knife trying to cut through a tough steak.
Yeah.
And it's going to show up in not so great ROI metrics when it comes to digital advertising and demand creation and capture. And I think it's an area that, just go look on the internet. You can see that it's an area that's neglected.
Mm-hmm.
And AI's made it worse. And AI is also going to make it worse for people that don't have good positioning. So it's kind of the cause, and it's also a really bad symptom as well, if that makes sense.
So if you had a magic wand right now, what would be something in your business that you could change to help eliminate an issue?
Eliminate an issue from my business or a customer. I mean, for
Either or.
customers, I think it would be having a super clear ROI metric that says my message is working or it's not. And I think you could probably even broaden that. I think most marketing dashboards are confidence machines versus precision measurement instruments. They tell you what you want to hear, but they don't necessarily tell you that the right things are working and the wrong things aren't.
Mm-hmm.
So I think getting that real measurement would be a magic wand to say definitively this channel is working, this message is working, But we know that doesn't exist, sadly.
No, a lot of subjectivity into that area,
There is.
unfortunately. And then, where can people connect with you or learn more about what you're doing?
LinkedIn's probably the best place, Jason. I'm on LinkedIn, Giles House, and love to chat to people about marketing and positioning and tech and products and all those good things.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time.
Likewise, thanks for having me on.
All right.